The world is in transition. There's a lot that has happened over the past decades, and a lot will continue to happen on various fronts. The fact that our human existence is shrouded in a lot of uncertainty is one thing that we need to pay attention to, because our lives are affected by events, by situations, by opportunities that we oftentimes have no control over. We are still reeling from the after effects of the deadly COVID-19 virus that swept across the world, and the many changes, adjustments that individuals, societies, and nations have had to make has been so significant. And so, in the next couple of weeks, I welcome you as we journey together in trying to uncover some important truths, some important principles, some important values that we can learn from the third book in my reflection series on this channel from Dr. Myles Munroe of blessed memory. And the third book we are examining, we are reflecting from, is the book titled The Principles and Benefits of Change. And it is my hope that we will get to learn a lot. We'll get to understand some of the key principles that can help us to navigate the times of change, so that at the end of the day, change will benefit us rather than be a, a source of challenge or a source of detriment to us. So the sub theme for the book is fulfilling your purpose in unsettled times. Fulfilling your purpose in unsettled times. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that we'll learn a lot from today's reflection. Okay, so the principles and benefits of change, fulfilling your purpose in unsettling times. And we'll begin by looking at the chapter 1 for today. Generally, the book helps us with, as I mentioned, principles that help in times of change, minor changes and major changes in our lives, how we can go through them and make change our advantage rather than our disadvantage. And it's inevitable that we would have different changes. Who you were yesterday is not who you are today. There are some opportunities you had yesterday that you are not having today, or the opportunities you have today that you may not have tomorrow. Many people have lost their jobs. Many people have lost some benefits they had. Yes, they never thought that they would ever lose it, but they ended up losing it. Many have lost marriages, relationships, educational opportunities, and a whole lot. Changes happen, and how we respond to those changes is critical. And so, chapter 1 begins with the theme everything changes, an inevitability shared by everyone on earth. And we'll look at some of the key highlights from the chapter as we can learn from. Now, the chapter begins with one key statement: the future has a way of arriving unannounced. And this is a quote from George Will. And the statement, it carries a lot. Very short statement, but it is really loaded. The future has a way of arriving unannounced. Earlier today, I was sharing on my WhatsApp status how the breakthrough that you may be looking out for could be just moments away. And therefore, the best you can do for yourself is to keep on being consistent, to keep on putting in the efforts, the exertions, doing all that is within your capacity to make sure that you are not stopping, you keep going, because that opportunity you are looking for, that helper you are looking for, that platform you are looking for, it may just be around the corner, and it can come at any time, unexpected. And so you want to be prepared when it arrives. And so this statement saying that the future has a way of arriving unannounced is very critical. Whether it is positive or negative, there's a lot that the future has in stock for us that we do not know. And the events and situations of life can turn anytime, whether in our favor or against our favor, without permission from us. And so it is important to have this understanding that whatever we are doing, change can arrive at any time, unannounced. So our lives are in a constant state of transition. Life is always moving forward. Nothing ever remains the same. Even those who live essentially quiet lives are affected by change. To a greater or lesser degree, we are continually being transported, suddenly or gradually, into the new, the different, the unexpected, and the untried. So a lot is happening. As you are growing, you realize that many things are fundamentally changing. How you think is changing, how you express emotions and control behavior, everything is changing. Your expectations of life are changing as you move from being a child to adolescence to young adulthood through to your older age. You realize that your perspective on life keeps changing because life keeps exposing you to new challenges, new territories, new experiences that will cause you to not be the same again, whether in the positive or in the negative. So change is a very important factor in our lives. And in this beginning chapter, we are beginning on the note that everything in life changes. And this should be the thing that you hold on to, that things change, things are not always the same. As a person, you will change, situations around you will change, whether for good or for bad. That is not really a cause to hold on tightly to. What we need to understand is that there is change and it can happen at any time. And we have here four types of change espoused by Dr. Myles. And the first one is change that happens to us. So these are the anticipated and unanticipated changes that affect our personal lives, our families, our careers, and so forth. So an individual who is working within an organization, something happens within the organization or something happens within the nation or globally, like the pandemic we experienced early on. There are wars going on in various territories. All of these can have an effect, tremendous effect on individuals. So there can be changes that happen to you based on events around your life, directly or indirectly. And these changes can be expected or may not be expected. They can happen to you without you expecting them. They are ones that we anticipate, and that happens to us. And so there's a change that happens to us. And number two, there's the change that happens around us. So unexpected or anticipated change that affects our society, our nation, our world, that also has some impact on us personally or in our ways of life. So there are the changes that continue to happen all around us. Changes in technology, changes in job roles, changes that are political in nature, changes that are affected by wars and the illnesses and pandemics and all that. These are changes that have a major impact on our societies, on our nations, and across the world. And in some way, they end up affecting us personally. And then there's a change that happens within us. And these are changes that are more to do with how we think, how we process information, how we deal with our emotions, mentally, psychologically, physically, the things that are happening within us. So unexpected or anticipated change that directly affects who we are. So who you are, directly affecting your personality, directly affecting how you behave and how you react to situations. So these are changes that are more internal, dealing with our mind and dealing with our body, dealing with our emotional experiences. And then number four, change that we initiate. And so, in as much as there are changes that happen to us, around us, and within us, we also, in our existence, cause changes to happen. So, something that you create or alter by your own plans. So something created or altered by plans we have implemented in order to move us from the present to a preferred future. So somebody may decide to move from one neighborhood to a different neighborhood for some reasons. Someone may decide that I want to change jobs. Someone may decide that I want to get married. Somebody may decide that I want to do this and that. The changes that we initiate are also change that we experience as people. And some of these changes may overlap. So we can identify each of the above as a distinct type of change, even though sometimes they may be overlapping over each other. So you see the change that happens to us and the change that happen around us, they could be overlapping. And in explaining both, you see how there are certain changes that affect our personal lives, our families, our careers, that are influenced by what is happening around us. And there are changes that will happen to us that are also influenced by certain actions that we take or initiate. So these changes, though distinct, can happen one over the other or one with the other. So what are the results of change? When change happens either to us, around us, within us, or we initiate change, what happens is that it causes our present to be transported into our future. And so change transports the present into a future that demands a response. So if somebody, for instance, decides to change jobs, now there is a need to do a job search, there's a need to readjust to a new working environment and all that. So there is a transportation from who you are now, the adjustments that you've been able to make over time, the achievements you've made in the present organization, into what you need to do to be able to succeed in the next venture, in the next organization, in the next environment that you will be moving into. And all of these responses that change demands would cause us to also make necessary changes with ourselves. So there is then the need for us to work on how we react to change. So how we react to change has greater consequences to us than we may realize. Sometimes people take a decision and do not take into account the consequences of that decision, because we do not look into exactly how that decision could change a lot about us and a lot about others. So one decision to move places, for instance, to leave one neighborhood to a different place, could have significant influences on your children if you are married and if you have children. It would have significant impact on your work routines and all that. So someone who is staying closer to their workplace and now moves to a different place will need to make adjustments in terms of how they move, their transportation, and the time they leave the house and all that. So there are changes that we may not pay attention to, but at the end of the day, because of our response to the change that needs to happen, we end up, having a lot to do. And so how we respond to change is very critical. And the book gives us an account from a movie, the Shawshank Redemption, and one of the characters called Brooks. And this is a man who hadn't lived in society for 5 decades. So for a long time of his life, he was in prison. And at a point he was released. He didn't want to come out. And this is how change becomes difficult for us. There are times where you find yourself in one particular situation, in one particular environment, and you become so used to it that if there's a need to move out, make a new change, a new adjustment, it is difficult for us to accept the change, even if that change is for our good. So Brooks finds it difficult to leave the prison. He wanted to do something that would cause him to be maintained in the prison or detained in the prison. But his friends talk him out of it, and he's released finally. Now, when he was on the bus getting home, the speed of the bus, which was normal to the people sitting in the bus at the moment, was one that he couldn't, adjust to. So he says that the bus speeds up to probably 35 or 40 miles per hour, but Brooks clutches tightly to the seat railing, because the speed is overwhelming to him. His expression of fear contrasts with the rest of the passengers on the bus, who just look bored. So this is a man who had found himself within the prison for almost 50 years. And in coming out, he comes to an environment, a new situation, a new experience that is strange to him. And to the people who were already in that system, used to that system of things, it was normal day. It was a normal day. It was not something that caused any fear in them. They were in the bus, they were feeling bored, but here was one person who was so afraid because of the speed of this bus. And he wrote to his friends saying that, I can't believe how fast things move on the outside. From the inside of prison to the outside society, he saw that there was significant change. The difference was so huge. The difference was so huge. So when change happens to us and we are not able to adjust to the change and have the right response to change, chances are that we will lose out. And unfortunately, Brooks died. He killed himself, he committed suicide, because the change that he had experienced was so overwhelming to him. So the effects of failing to implement positive change to improve one's life can range from someone missing out on a single rewarding experience to not fulfilling his or entire purpose for living. This was an opportunity for a man who had been behind bars for many years to come out and be able to take on a new leaf and leave a certain impact that he couldn't have in the 50 years of being in prison. But he lost that opportunity because the change that had happened was so overwhelming to him. He couldn't adjust. He couldn't adjust. He couldn't adjust. And that is something that is happening to many people. We experience disappointments, we experience certain periods of our lives, the fallow periods, the challenging periods. And because there's no understanding, or we don't have the right people to help us navigate that changing scene of life, we end up either giving up on life, and some go ahead to commit suicide. And there are many instances of people that have committed suicide. They've taken their own lives because they gave up on life. And it could be such a level of loss if we are not able to implement positive change that will help improve our lives. So change is important to every person, whether young, old, or small. We all have that key thing about our life, that is change, and things that are happening to us, positive and negative. How we react to them is important, because if we react in the wrong manner, we do not have the opportunity to fully express our potential. And in the past two reflective books, Understanding Your Potential and Releasing Your Potential, we got to understand and appreciate how God has given us a lot that He expects us to maximize while we are here on earth, so that we don't go to the grave and add up to the wealth of talents and of knowledge that are buried in there. So it says that how we relate to change has a significant impact on our quality of life and whether or not we accomplish what we are meant to during our lifetime on earth. We have a limited time, whether it is 100 years, 200 years, 30 years, whatever amount of time you have on earth, we do not know. And so we have the opportunity to make an impact and to be an example of potential that was fully used. But how we relate to change is critical in this agenda. Understanding how to view, respond to, and benefit from change is vital to a well-balanced and fulfilled life. So let's look at 5 principles of change as outlined in the chapter. The first principle is that nothing on earth is as permanent as change. That looks like a paradox. It is. So change keeps happening, and therefore change is one of the constants of life. So it's strange that change and constant will be in the same sentence, but that is the truth. One thing that's always present on this earth is change. A baby is born, they don't remain the same. Things continue to change. The food they eat, the way they talk, they learn how to walk, things change. There are a lot of inventions made many years ago, and they've undergone various updates. In the world of technology, this version is released and another version is released. Different brands coming up with different products and updating the systems, updating the softwares, updating a lot of things change. And so nothing on earth is as permanent as change. Principle number 2 is that change is continual. So our lives keep moving forward. The experiences that we get through, the challenges that we get through, the opportunities we get through, they are all part of that continuum of change in our lives. So when you go to bed, when you take a vacation, when you go on a land break, change does not stop. Change keeps happening. Change is ceaseless. Principle number 3 is that everything changes. Animals change, people change, products change, objects change, things change. The details of our lives are always in transition. Knowledge keeps changing. The content may be the same, but over time, people are adding to the theories, subtracting from the theories. The philosophies are being made more simpler or made more complex. How we solve mathematical equations, the fundamentals will be the same, but making it simpler is all part of change. A lot is happening, and things that change include knowledge. So your knowledge will change over time. You are always taking in more knowledge. You learn, you relearn, and unlearn, and relearn, and learn. There's a lot that is changing when it comes to knowledge. Your interest will change. When you were a child, the things that were your dreams, your expectations may not be what you had as your expectations or dreams as you grew, because the experiences of life teach you that certain things are not as important as you thought when you were a child. There are things that you focus on now that in the next year, in the next few months, you may not focus on. Things change when it comes to your interests. When it comes to your interest. Number three, your values and priorities will change. Last year, the things that you made, a priority may not be the things that you make a priority now. In the next 1 year, the things that I consider as my priorities may not be the same. There were things that last year I felt were important things to me, but now they are not important. So our values and priorities will change. They will change. People get married, the reasons why they got married over time changes. And so they begin to refocus on more important things than the fantasy they had before getting married. Things change. Somebody may have a plan of doing this and doing that, and then the next day they change plans. So there are things that we change because our priorities have changed and our values have changed. There are certain people, they were in a certain lifestyle, enjoy the clubbing, the partying, and all that. And then over time, you realize that they are no longer doing the same. Their values have changed. They have had an experience, an encounter that changes what they feel is important. Your body will also change. You are growing, your stature is changing, things are changing about the body. And in this time of life where a lot of people are doing a lot to their bodies through plastic surgeries and all that, you realize that things are really changing when it comes to people's body. Your family relationship networks will also change. While you are single, how you relate with your family members will change once you get married, once you give birth. There are certain things that when it comes to your life will change because of the moments that you find yourself in the periods that you find yourself in. If you lose a loved one, you lose a parent, you lose a child, you have a family member getting a chronic condition, all of these change the dynamics of your relationship with the family. Your marriage will change. The dynamics of your marriage relationship will change over time. The mini vacations and all that, over time they will change. Priorities will change in the marriage. Financial priorities, priorities relating to your children, and all that will change. What you wear before you give birth to your first child, what you wear before you give birth to your third child will change because life is constantly changing. Your children will change and other things will change about you. So these are areas that change will happen to us. Various areas, including that which is not even listed here. So everything changes. Everything changes. And that is principle number 3. And principle number 4 is that change is inevitable. You cannot but anticipate that things will change because you can't avoid change. And as we have mentioned, many things change. I had plans when I got home today after work, what I'll do and what I'll not do. But at the end of the day, a few things had to be adjusted because of the demands of the time that I found myself in. So change is inevitable. You wake up in the morning and you have a headache or something and it changes the dynamic of your day. Change is inevitable. This conclusion is not easy for some people to accept. Nevertheless, we must come to acknowledge that change is indeed inevitable. When I settled this fact in my own heart and mind, my life became much easier to live. It is not healthy for us to believe that life will always remain the same. And this is something that can be a troubling thing for many people. That life can change, things can happen. You can't always be the same. Relationships may change. Our expectations may change. how people behave may change. And this is something that many people have failed or struggled to understand. So in relationships, in various forms, whether married relationship, friendships, work relationships, when people's attitudes change in a moment, we struggle to accept same. But that is the human nature. That is part of nature, that things change and people change. Different situations may bring out different aspects of us. And so change is inevitable and we must accept that reality. And the final principle is that change is a principle of life and creation. So in the beginning of time, the scripture says in Genesis chapter 1 that the earth was without form and void. But then something happened. The Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the deep, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And then things began to change. God began a change process, and He breathed into the man that He formed out of the dust of the earth, and he became a living soul. And He puts this man in charge of the vegetation and all that He has created. All of that was change happening. And He says that be fruitful, multiply. He was putting in them this charge of change that recreate, cause things to expand, cause things to bear fruit and all that. Animals are giving birth, humans are giving birth, plants are bringing forth their kind. Things are happening, life begetting life. Things are happening, and it's all part of the natural order that God has created. So change is a principle of life and creation. So this last statement is really a summation of all the above. Change is a principle of life. It is the way the world functions. It affects everybody. In one sense, change is proof that you are alive. Everything that you go through is a manifestation of some type of change, and it's just a part of life. And I can't agree more or less with this statement. It is just a part of life. And change is what brings equality. So change is the human equalizer. And working within the hospital environment and seeing patients that are going through very severe conditions, it sometimes, saddens me, and you hear the stories of people who were strong, who were active, and they come for sessions, and they just an event changed the course of their lives. One wakes up in the morning and feels that the part of their body, they can't feel it, it's not moving. They've had a brain stroke or something. Something happens and changes their life completely. So whether you are rich or you are poor, you are from the village or from the city, change is the human equalizer. Things happen and it can change anything and everything about you. So nobody has a monopoly on change. It says change affects everybody, no matter where they are on the planet and no matter who they are. So he tells us about a man. So I know a man who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but found out he had a serious illness that none of his doctors could cure. When he told me this, I thought change really affects us all. So the whole idea of change, which this book is going to help us to understand in-depthly, is really important, because change is inevitable and we need to understand and know how we can manage and react, respond, adjust, and learn to live with change. So change is every person's experience. It is every human being's experience. And why is it that it is difficult for us to accept change? Why is it difficult for us to accept change when we know that indeed things are changing, including who we are? So whenever you encounter change, especially change you consider disruptive or distressing, don't feel you are alone in this. We are all subject to change. But why is it difficult for us to accept change? Number one, it says that we are double-minded towards change. So for most part, if change is in the positive and it is benefiting us, you get a new job, higher salary, you get um, a new house, something, you get a new friend, you get married, you have children, all of these exciting, changes in our lives, we accept it and we are excited by it. We feel so great about the change that is happening. But if the change is change that is negative, you lose a job, you lose a loved one, you feel at something, something does not go right, you are disappointed, who you were 3 years ago, you have become worse off than you were 3 years ago. It is difficult for us to accept that. So in many ways, people live contently with change and welcome it. They want to wear the latest styles, use the newest technology innovations, employ easier methods for accomplishing everyday tasks and so on. However, when it comes to change that is not in our favor, it is difficult for us to accept it. And it is in our human nature to not want the things that are negative. But indeed, it will happen. And it is important for us to respond right. We are therefore double-minded about change. Good change can come, but we should never have to deal with what we perceive as unpleasant or negative change. And that is what many of us have in mind. If it is good, that's fine. And if it is bad, I don't want it to come my way. And yes, it's natural and it's all actually logical. Nobody wants bad things to happen to them. But it is important to have in mind that change, whether good or whether bad, will happen. And we are not in any way able to tell when they will happen. Some we can anticipate, but we can't always anticipate whether the positive or the negative will happen. It is important that we brace ourselves to this truth, and it will help us to navigate our way through the challenging, trying, and confusing times of life. And number two is that we are not taught to deal with change. And it's unfortunate. Many people have not had the opportunity to be told, yes, generally we may be aware that things change, but to be told specifically helped to understand, helped to build a mindset that knows that change happens, things don't stay the same in our schools, that the students will understand that I may be the brilliant student in the class, but I may not always get the 90, I may not always get the 100, I may not always be the first. So that if the time comes where they are not the first and another person is the first, it does not make them go through a period of depression. It does not push them to a point where they feel valuable, that they feel less valuable, they feel less, important than they actually are. It is critical that they understand change can happen, and what you need to do is to respond appropriately in a positive way, so that whatever steps you need to take to be the first again, you take the steps. It does not change who you are. It does not change your abilities. It is just happening because change is always available with us. We are not taught this, and so it is difficult for us if we experience any form of change, especially the negative. In a similar way, many people have never been taught they need to develop certain skills to be able to initiate changes, innovative ideas, innovation through skills that are built. Our school systems, for the most part, teach us the theories, teach us a lot of knowledge that may not be practical in the world out there. So we come out, many people come out, and they can't do things that will change the dynamics of their society, bring inventions and products, whether it is physical products, or it's more intellectual in nature, they are not able to initiate change because we are not taught that there are certain skills and this is how we can develop those skills in order to initiate change. Even if people desire positive change, they are hindered from obtaining it by fear and uncertainty, or because they act rashly instead of purposely and wisely. So we are double-minded about change, and it is also because we are not taught to deal with change in the right way. So the question then is change working for you? As we come to an end of this chapter, is change working for you? Whether positive change or negative change, how is it working for you? What is your experience with change in your life? Do you generally feel that change is working for you, or do you feel that its influence are working against you? Do you know how to turn negative changes to your benefits? To what extent have you been initiating positive change in your life? So there are 5 key ways that are proposed in this chapter that will help us to typically approach change and cause change. 5 ways in which people will typically approach change, and we'll get to, as we move on, expand on which of them will be useful for us in ensuring that we respond appropriately to change. So these are the 5 ways. Number 1, people watch things happen, and this is passivity. They don't care, that attitude of really, I'm just there, anything can happen. And there's this popular thing that many people in my part of the world would say, what can come can come. So there are people that watch things happen, don't react to change because they have no real interest in causing change. Then the number 2, there are people that let things happen. So they feel defeated. That whole bit of learned helplessness. They probably have tried and didn't work out, and therefore they just draw back. So they say that there's nothing I can do about this. That is their mindset. So they are against change, or they say that nothing can be done to make things better. So these are people that just let things happen. They are just there and things are going wrong and they can't do anything because they feel there's nothing that can be done. Number 3, there are people that ask what happened. People that ask what happened. And these are the individuals that they don't really know what is all going on. Yes, change is inevitable, but they really have no idea that change can happen at any time. So they seem curious. This is an inquisitive response, but it doesn't go much further than mere curiosity or interest in the latest gossip. They really do not care exactly what is happening and how they can contribute to making things better. They just want to know what is happening. And number 4, there are people that defy what happens. They deny the existence of change happening in their personal lives, in their family, in whatever area. This is when someone tries to resist inevitable change in his or her life. And it's a defense mechanism. In psychology, we would call it denial as a defense mechanism. They deny that things are changing. They waste valuable time and energy in the process thereof, because before you realize, the reality dawns on them and time may have gone so far. So these are people that deny or defy what happens. And then there's the final group of people that make things happen. This is a proactive response. They are the people that are actively engaged in ensuring that when things are positively happening, things are changing positively, they are part of the process and the output. And things are going wrong, when things are going bad, they are part of the process of correcting it, of making the necessary changes that will work in their favor. Proactive people are the ones who usually succeed in life against all odds. And Dr. Myles says, I refer to these men and women as world changers. You will never really know who you are, who you can be, if you don't understand the nature of change and understand how to shape its consequences. With each change that happens to you, around you, or within you, you can do two things. You learn to define and interpret the change, and you discover principles for responding to the change so that it benefits you and others. And number two, with each change that you wish to initiate, you wish to carry out, you can also do two things. Learn how creating changes will enable you to fulfill your purpose in life, and two, discover practical methods that will help you to implement specific plans to achieve those purposes. This is very important. This is very critical. And this brings us to the end of this chapter and the key things that I feel we can pick from there. Change can be an enemy or friend to you depending on how you respond to change. So you want to take your time and assess the whole situation of your life. Reflect on your life all this while and see whether change has been working for you or against you. Change is inevitable. For 1 minute, you may be here, and the next moment, something would have changed. Within minutes, within seconds, a lot is changing across the globe. Is change working for you or working against you? I hope that in the next chapters, as we reflect on the key lessons therein, we will learn a lot. And by the time we are done with about 16 chapters of this book, we will become world changers because we have learned and equipped ourselves to be able to handle change in the right way. Thank you so much for joining today's episode, today's chapter reflection from Dr. Myles Munroe's book, The Principles and Benefits of Change. Please have a good time. Stay safe. Remember to always be positive and be a blessing. Bye-bye.